We are talking about how to speak to each other in a godly way. We've spent this academic year studying God's wisdom, especially from the book of Proverbs, and we are concluding that series with a series on words, how to speak wisely to each other. This is the essence of godly character. And this is where ungodly character most often manifests itself and in some of the most destructive ways. It is also how godly people gather together and build community in God's name with each other. And we do this through words. We speak to each other. We build a common sense of friendship and love and purpose. We build our life together with words. Words are powerful. So we've been talking about this, and I was reflecting on this morning. It occurred to me that I really didn't learn how to speak in a helpful, edifying way to the people around me. I didn't learn that at church. What I learned from church was how people start fighting and how quarrels start and how people get divided from each other. And that's maybe you've had that experience at church where you have this contentiousness at church and quarreling and fighting, divisiveness. This is one of the sad realities of church life, that we are human beings and we do not communicate rightly with each other. No, I didn't learn it at church necessarily. If I learned it at all, I learned it from a man who was my violin professor in undergrad at Willamette University in Oregon. My violin professor was not a Christian. I believe he was kind of an agnostic Jewish man, and yet what I got from him was a deep sense of the importance of speaking well to each other under stress. And the stress for musicians is rehearsals. Sometimes concerts, but you can't talk to each other during the concert. You're supposed to be playing music. It's in rehearsals where you're trying to work out all the problems and play together and play in tune and interpret things rightly. And I quickly developed an admiration for my teacher, Dr. Rauslin, and his way of communicating with other players in rehearsal. It was affirming, it was positive, it was clear, and it raised issues effectively and solved problems. When you're in a rehearsal and it's just not going well, all sorts of emotions come into play, and you start to get frustrated, and you can start to accuse other players. You're flat, or you're sharp. You're late, or you're coming in too soon. You're rushing. You're not keeping a steady beat. And so we can go back and forth like that with accusations. But when I would rehearse with Dr. Rauslin, he would say things like, I don't think we agree about where that pitch is. Could we work on that for a moment? And it was usually F natural. I don't know what it was about F natural that was so troublesome, but I would be playing with him, let's say in a string quartet or playing duets, and we would work on really getting the pitch exactly right from the perspective that we're probably both a little bit off. So if we come together and really find that note and really agree on it, then it's going to be solid. but we're not going to start on the assumption that my F natural is correct and your F natural is dead wrong. We're going to start with the assumption that we need to find it together. Now that's speaking to each other from a heart of reverence for music, for playing notes well and playing them together. And so I was very influenced by this. When I think of the emotions that come when we're under stress, I look at this guy and I say, that's a violinist. I don't know who he was. I just know. This is orchestra face, what you're looking at here. This is grumpy. It's confrontational. You're wrong and you're irritating me, and I'm going to tell you all about it. How do you reply to someone like this violinist here? I don't know if he was a violinist, but I just have seen this face in rehearsals many, many times. Well, when we come to this biblically, we come to the reality that we have to restrain our emotions in order to speak to each other wisely. If we view our words as just a way to give vent to what we feel, we're not going to build community, at least not a strong one. We're not going to accomplish what we want to accomplish. We're just going to blow off steam, that's all, like apparently this guy wants to do. So we have Proverbs 15:1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Very famous proverb, more famous than it is observed in application. It is very difficult to put this proverb into practice, because when someone is coming at you with harsh words and wrath, you don't want to respond with that soft answer. Soft here doesn't necessarily mean soft in volume, although that's probably part of it. Soft is like tender, like pliable. Think about James when it says, the wisdom of heaven is first peaceable, it's reasonable, it's open to reason, it's open to dialogue. Soft in the sense of pliable, as opposed to hitting a brick wall. Not reasonable, not open to argument, not open to saying, well, my F natural may be a little bit sharp or flat, and we've got to find this together. That's not the reason, that's not the wisdom of this world. The wisdom of this world is run by wrath and strong feeling about who you are and how right you are. So this soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. We could multiply illustrations of this over and over and over again. You've all been in the meeting where it's just kind of going along on the edge, and then somebody lets her rip. And goes into the tirade and starts telling people what's what in a very offensive way, and there's no putting that back in control. That meeting is going to fly out of control. Let's think about this verse. Your words can be calm. They really can be calm. If you think about where we've come from in this series, we started out by saying right speaking, wise speaking comes from a place of the fear of the Lord. Whatever situation we're in, there's something bigger at stake than just the disagreement that we're having, the problem that we're having. The Lord, for us, is present in our disagreements. The Lord is at work in our disagreements. When we're debating things, arguing about things, wrestling with things together, God is at work. I know that's bad news. We would rather think that God is at work when everybody agrees. No, that's the end of his work. That's when he has brought people through a difficult challenge, and that's the end state of his work. When he's at work is when people just don't see eye to eye, and we have to figure it out. So this calm has to start from a place of recognizing God is here in this disagreement, and I need to approach this disagreement in the fear of God, not in self-regard. We also talked about the fact that our speaking comes from what we've been listening to our whole lives. We talked about the fact that Solomon got his wisdom in large measure from David, his father. And he tells us that in Proverbs chapter 4. And so we looked at that, and we looked at the source of Solomon's wisdom. And we said, one of the things we have to do in order to speak wisely is do kind of an inventory of what we've been listening to our whole lives. What have we been hearing from our parents? What have we heard from our spouse? What have we received from the people around us? And kind of do an inventory of that. If you want to find calm, then it may be that you need a season of doing an inventory of where you've learned anger. Where did that come from? Where did you hear about that? Where did you see anger and wrath and stirring up strife? Where did you see that modeled? And so we go back to the sources of these things. But the goal, we said a couple of weeks ago, is to be a blessing, a tree of life. And our words can become a tree of life. In fact, we looked at Proverbs 15:4. A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. So you can be calm in your words by fearing the Lord and realizing he's in the situation, by having gone through the sources of your own anger and feelings of fear and anxiety and those things, and really dealing with those. But also you can be calm by keeping in mind the goal. Your goal in any disagreement is to be a tree of life, that your words nourish. And there's another goal, and that is truth. We looked at this last week. We can be calm knowing that the truth is a real thing. The truth is out there, not in here. And the truth is something we are looking for. It's not something that we have already. If we had it already, wouldn't we all agree? The fact that we don't agree on so many things means we're looking for it. So we're in rehearsal, you and I. And maybe we hit some notes and say, wow, we don't agree. Our notes clash. Your F natural is higher than mine. So let's work on this. Let's find that true note, because it's out there. It's not necessarily in my head. So calm comes from all of these things working together. Now, where does harshness come from? Your words can be calm or they can be inciting. I didn't say exciting. You can speak in an exciting way, but I'm talking about inciting. I'm talking about provoking a wrathful response. Well, how would you do that? You just take all of the four things that we just talked about and flip them. In any disagreement, you approach the matter as if God were not there, or worse, as if you actually are God. You've got all the answers. You know what's true already. And so you just start there, and it's the other person's job to see how divine and right you are. Just try that in your next argument. See what happens. It will be inciting. Your words will be inciting if you never take the time, set aside a season in your life to say, how did I learn to talk the way I talk? Where did this come from? What was I reacting to when I was 5? What was I reacting to when I was 10 or 16? What has constantly been drummed into me, either good or bad? If you don't do that, if you just assume that everything inside you is right, then your words will be inciting. But if you go through that inventory, you've got a chance to evaluate it. Thirdly, if your goal is to be victorious or in control or dominant somehow in the situation, instead of being a blessing, then your words will not come from a calm place. They will come from that harshness, that heat of wanting to dominate others. And of course, if you assume that the truth is already in here and that all the other person needs is to get what you've already got, you will incite a harsh response. So wisdom in Proverbs 15:1 is something like this: my words don't relieve my emotions. My words just express my emotions. That's all they do. We often think that if I could just give vent to what I really feel, it would feel better. It might feel worse, because our words don't relieve our emotions. Repentance before God, fear of God, confession of sin to God and to each other, these are the things that relieve our negative, harmful emotions. So wisdom says, restrain what you feel and don't speak out of that heat. Instead, speak out of the fear of the Lord, reverence for truth, and a desire to be a tree of life. Let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. I'm just going to check to see if there are any questions. Not yet. So this chapter here in Proverbs 15, it has a lot about our words, about the tongue in it. And when you get away from verse 1, you start to see a lot more of the dynamics of how verse 1 really works. We have delusions. We have ways of thinking that just are not really in contact with reality, and especially when it comes to our emotions. So let's think about some of these things. We like to claim that we are speaking from the heart, and that because we are sincere, that makes what we say okay. I'm speaking to you from the heart. I'm saying what I really think, and therefore my words, whatever comes out, you should just accept as genuine and real and good, because it's coming from my heart. Proverbs comes back at us and says, yeah, but what if you're sincerely wrong? What about that? Let's look at a couple of verses here. Verse 2 of Proverbs 15. The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouths of fools pour out folly. When you pour something out, are you doing it deliberately bit by bit. If I have a bucket of water and I want to pour out that water on a plant that I'm watering in my garden, which we don't actually have to do here in Ithaca because, especially this week. Anyhow, let's just suppose I did have to do that. Would I take a spoon and go to that bucket and kind of spoon out, bit by bit, the water to the plant? No. If I'm going to pour it out, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the contents of the bucket and I'm going to dump it into the plant. Maybe that's smart, maybe it's not, but I'm just saying, if you're going to pour it out, you're not in control of how every little bit of that water hits the ground. You're just pouring it. That's a fool with his mouth. What's coming out, what's being poured out of that bucket is the contents of that fool's heart. And the contents are folly. And it's just pouring out. It's sincere. It's authentic. It's real. And it's a hot mess. And you don't want to be around it, do you? How good is sincerity? Well, sincerity has some good to it. But, and I don't want to create the impression that God's wisdom turns us into false people who cover up what they think. We'll talk about this in a moment. But this idea we have that sincerity and authenticity is what we're really striving for, look at the internet. The internet is the human heart in all its sincerity and authenticity, no limits. Because you're not really talking to a real person. You're just posting. You're just posting from one profile to another. So you don't have to deal with an angry response unless they post back, which they will. But this dynamic of saying what is on your mind at the moment with all the heat and authenticity that you can muster, where is it getting us? It is showing us, in fact, what is in the human heart. And that's all it's doing. But suppose, just work with me here, suppose instead of, let's call it early sincerity, instead of saying what you think in the first draft, suppose you went back and said, God's in this disagreement. He's present here. He's at work here. He's got a plan for this. And I need to work with his plan, not mine. Suppose you said that. Your heart changes, or it should. And then you say, I've already learned this lesson. Dad used to talk to me this way, and I used to respond back, or Mom used to do this and say that, and I've already been through this. I know these responses that I'm tempted to give right now. I know what they do. So I'm going to push pause on that. I'm going to work on this. I'm going to ask, what do I really want out of this disagreement? I want to be a tree of life. So I'm going to change my goals, and you see how your heart is changing? The more you do these kinds of inventories, the more you look at the words you'd like to say, and you just kind of run a red line through them all. And what you're left with is a lot less and a lot more life. And then you work on your heart to ask this question: is all of this stuff that I dearly want to say, is it even true? Is there anything even factual in what I'm saying, or is it all just my perceptions? Now, let's suppose you did all of that work, and maybe you do it in an hour before what you know is going to be a tough meeting. Or maybe you do it in 30 seconds when the temperature went from 0 to 150 very quickly. Maybe that's all the time you've got, but you take that time and you do some editing. Is that insincere? You know, it's a funny thing. My violin teacher, when I was first around him, I started to wonder, you know, what does it take to get this guy really mad? When does he just kind of lose it in a rehearsal? Does that ever happen? And I was around him I worked intensively with him, hours every day, for 4 years. Never saw it, not once. And what I concluded from that was, he wasn't just being diplomatic. His approach to rehearsal was sincere. That was the real him. He had learned this. He had internalized this. You can too, because he didn't have the Holy Spirit, and I think you do. I think there's a higher sincerity. The higher sincerity goes through the first draft with a big old red pen and says, I think I'm going to chuck all of this because it's no good, and I'm going to focus on these things so that they will give life and truth. That's sincere and life-giving. Let's try this with another delusion that we have. We claim that what we say is justified by our anger. So we start ranting and we start really saying abusive, insulting things to people, and we claim that it's all justified because we feel so deeply about this issue, and we're so angry. Okay. Let's look at a couple of verses here. Actually, just one. Carla read it for us earlier, verse 18 of chapter 15. A hot-tempered man stirs up strife. That's the guy whose picture we just saw a few minutes ago. Hot temper, short fuse. He's ready to go. All you got to do is disagree with him just a little bit, and he's going to flare. He's going to stir up strife. That's his life. That's how he rolls. And the contrast here is he who is slow to anger quiets contention. So the provocations are all there, the disagreements are all there, the stress, the anxiety, it's all there, but the fuse is longer. And this person who is slow to anger is able to hold his or her temper through the contention, and the temperature, this proverb says, goes down. And if you've ever done this, you know this is true. It is worth it to do these things. Every time I do it, all 3 times, I'm so happy. The rest of the time, I said, wow, I should have remembered Proverbs 15:18 and had a longer fuse. So what is this saying? Just like God's wisdom comes at us about sincerity and says, it is possible for you to be sincerely, authentically a fool. Do you want that pouring out? Really? Is that the authenticity that you want to dump on the people around you? Same with anger. You claim that your anger justifies what you're saying. Does it? What if it's just a short fuse? And it probably is. Here's another one. Perspective. If I'm going to make you mad this morning, it's going to be right here. We love the perspective card. Well, that's just your point of view. I have my point of view, which is a nice way of saying we're not going to agree, and we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to work on it. You can argue with me, and I can argue with you, but nothing's going to change. We are locked in our perspectives, and that's the way it is. Proverbs comes at us and says, I don't think that's real. I think your perspective is limited, the Holy Spirit says through Solomon. I think your point of view is narrow. And what if you adopted another one? And so we have Proverbs like this. Verse 26 of chapter 15. The thoughts of the wicked are really disappointing to God. Is that what you read there? I hope that's not it. What is it that constitute an abomination to the Lord? An abomination is that stench that makes you start running. This is disgusting. It turns your stomach the moment you smell it. What is it that is an abomination to the Lord? The thoughts of the wicked. We're in trouble, aren't we? We're in that territory that Jesus puts us in Matthew chapter 5 that says, before you killed someone, you hated them. Before you committed adultery, you wanted that other person over there. Everything starts inside of us. Or to put it in our terms, everything sinful in us is in our perspective. Which means you can't trust your own point of view. Now that can be a hard reality. It is a hard reality. It's the first thing we forget because we're locked in our point of view. It's all we've got. Except that's not true, is it? We actually can be larger people than just our own perspective. How do we do that? By adopting another one. We have this ability to step into somebody else's shoes. Here's what the Bible would suggest. First of all, step into God's shoes and look at your contention with someone else from his point of view. Now what have you got? Well, the first thing you've got is truth. You've got the point of view that takes in everything. But the second thing you've got is the tree of life that says this contention, this disagreement where the points of view don't line up, this can become a fruitful relationship, a tree of life. That's what God does. He brings people out of their narrow points of view, brings them together in his point of view. We are not locked in our own perspectives. And one of the great liberating things about the Scriptures and the wisdom of God is the ability that the Holy Spirit gives us through the Word of God to take agency over our point of view and make different choices. And to adopt a point of view that is actually foreign to us, God's. And so what flows out of that a different way of speaking, a different way of thinking about disagreement. So what is the wisdom of God saying here? It's saying self-congratulation about all the sincerity that you exhibit to other people is not going to help you before the bar of God. Pleading how angry you are as a justification for saying what you say is not going to help you before the bar of God. And pleading that it's just your perspective, it's your point of view. Your point of view is valid. The judge at the bar of God is going to look at you one day and say, your perspective. What about mine? I gave you life. I was before you. I come after you. I know you're coming and going. I know your thoughts. I know your words before you speak them. I know you're rising up and you're lying down. I've got it all right here. What about my perspective? I know you better than you know yourself. That's the conversation on the last day. So we are accountable on these issues. Let me ask you a couple of questions. And before I do that, I think someone has asked me a couple of questions. Let's see if we can look at this. Since our emotions can be delusional, what do you think is the role of emotions in God's design for our lives? This is a great question. Just because our emotions don't tell us the truth about life doesn't mean they're useless. Our emotions are a great source of truth about ourselves. Like this guy, if I could just hold a mirror up to this violinist and say, this is who you are. These emotions, this is what's driving you right now. How often do we get that kind of look at who we are? It can be a very powerful thing. So the role of emotions in the Christian life is a valid one. It's a way of taking a look at ourselves and saying, I am really, really angry. That is what I am feeling right now. That's not what I'm feeling right now, by the way, but just work with me here. And if I can look at myself and say, now, that's not necessarily coming from a good place. I might be right in my anger, but that's not going to solve anything. So where is this anger coming from? What am I afraid of? What am I reacting to? How have I been insulted? How do I feel powerless? Those are the sources of anger. The fact that I am angry is telling me this is what I think about my situation. Now, why do I think that? So the role of emotions in our life is to be a mirror, and that's why you find David, for example, in the Psalms, describing his emotions to God. It's a kind of mirror that he is using to say, this is what is inside me. This is what I think about what I'm going through. And it's coming out in my emotions. So here's a question that proposes a scenario. How do you do this? How do you use these principles about words in an emergency full custody hearing? Great example. Maximum stress, maximum anxiety and fear, lots of threats. The crucial thing under stress is to remain calm. So walk through those four things we started with, we started this series with. This situation isn't just about me. This is about God's plan in this situation for my children and the custody of my children. And so, I need to honor God in my conduct in this hearing because it's His plan that's the issue. It's not me, and it's not even my kids. It's Him. If I honor Him, there will be a good outcome for my kids, all things being equal, because He's in charge of this. So the second thing was you want to go through the things that you've experienced and the things that you've heard, and the labels that have been put on you, and you want to deal with that before you go through the hearing. And say, these labels, these things that I've been told about myself, I need to not believe those things, and I need to believe what God says about me. Maybe it is that I'm forgiven. Maybe it is that I am changing. Maybe it is that I am indeed failing in my parenting or in my marriage in particular ways, and I need to confess that. Whatever that is, you need to go through those kinds of things and say what's true and know what's true for yourself. And then you think, in this hearing, I want to be a tree of life. You say, that's crazy. You can't be a tree of life in court. Yes, you can. It is possible. It can be done. You can be a tree of life to a judge who wants to see truth. And you can exhibit those things. But if you have that goal, it will probably become evident in the way you conduct yourself. And then there's this matter of the truth. Your reverence for the truth is going to give you a sense of calm. I'm standing on what is right. And God's going to honor that, even if this judge doesn't. It's in some other way, the Lord will honor it. Those are some ideas for a very stressful situation. More questions coming in here. What should I do when my loved ones all think I'm wrong? And when we talk, they want me to agree with them on deep issues that I don't. In other words, they say they are open to talking, but only when I agree with them. Do I keep silent? That's a very difficult question. Sometimes there is a time to keep silent and just say, well, we've talked about this, and my mind hasn't changed. And talking about it and rehashing it isn't going to change it. It's just going to make our relationship worse. So let's find a way to disagree about this and keep going in our relationship. There might be a time for that. Proverbs is not saying that every conversation always needs to happen. Sometimes the conversations need to stop because they're not productive. So another very good question. Sometimes anger and harsh responses, like having a shield up. No one is going to walk over me. Very definitely. And that's a good image. If anger and heat is your shield, that image is used in the Psalms. Who actually is our shield? Who does David say our shield is? Isn't it the Lord? And so there's something very important here about replacing our faith in our own shields, our anger, and transferring that faith to the Lord. These are excellent questions. Someone else says, I've always seen venting as a sort of emotional problem-solving trick. basically in private or with someone I trust. I say all the stuff in my heart out loud and then observe the words that I'm wrong about. Are you saying venting is wrong all the time? Sounds like this is describing counseling, where maybe you're talking to someone and you're saying, look, this is what I'm feeling about this situation, and you're doing it with that third party in order to forestall doing it destructively with the person you disagree with. I think that can be legit, especially if the person you're talking to, your counselor, is able to say to you, have you really thought this through? Because it doesn't sound like it. Have you considered this? So if your counselor is really trustworthy and able to kind of puncture all of that world that we all live in, that can be a very productive thing. So venting, not necessarily the wrong thing all the time. It just depends on the person you're trusting to do it. So here are 2 questions to wrap up. When you're confronting this week an argument, a contentious, ongoing situation, ask yourself, did I try another perspective on this? Have I really done that? It's easy to say, oh yeah, I looked at this from 5 different angles. Okay, try God's. Did I try that? Secondly, what do you want? By the way, the outline in the bulletin says, do I wang something? A terrible typo. I don't know how that happened. I'm going to go check my outline that I supplied the office, but anyway, do I want to give calm or inflict pain? Sometimes we're not really honest about what we want. Sometimes we just want to inflict pain, and that's why we say the things we do. So here, these are 2 questions that I use to try to bring clarity to the situations that I'm in and clarify how I should speak in those disagreements. This, friends, is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we show whether we actually trust God or not with the things that we say. And this is where new life can come in your life. It is a powerful bit of wisdom from God's Word, and the more I learn about it, the better my life gets, and I know it will be for you too.